Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Emotionally Intelligent Parenting Podcast. Today I am diving into a topic that is very close to my heart, anxiety. So I'm kind of getting personal with this one because honestly, anxiety and I have been well acquainted over the years. This is like from my childhood days of overthinking every little thing, all the way back to how it impacted my friendships, my confidence, but even later as my career as a speech pathologist. So yeah, we go way back, but here's the thing. I know that I'm not alone in this, and I know that my growth and development and learning of emotional intelligence was a huge game changer. So that's why I'm sharing my story today. I'm going to explore what anxiety really is, just like beyond the sweaty palms and the butterflies in the stomach and racing thoughts. Also, the different types of anxiety disorders, which you may not even realize exist. And most importantly, some of these thinking habits or like the traps that often our kids and us, if we have anxiety, our kids can fall into and they get stuck in there. Plus, of course, I'm going to spill some of my favorite research-backed strategies that I use with my private clients because as part of my emotional intelligence work, I also work with kids who have anxiety. So this stuff really starts to help them break free from that spiral. And I often say, I wish I had this stuff as a kid, and I didn't. And it took me probably 20 plus years to kind of break out of it. And that's why I do a lot of the work that I do now. No surprises. If you're new here, then a huge welcome from me. I am glad you're here. I'm glad maybe you've stumbled across the podcast, but for those of you returning, thank you for coming back. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I'm Stephanie Pinto, the host, and I'm a mum of two. I'm here in Sydney, Australia, and I'm a best-selling author, an international speaker, and an award-winning coach in everything to do with emotional intelligence. So I just want to say we are far from perfect as parents. You guys may have seen some of the episodes I did recently with my husband, Alex. He's starting to come on, and I think it's really insightful and so helpful to see his completely different perspective, even though we're on the same page. Like, he's from a different culture, a different background, everything. And emotional intelligence has brought us on the same page as parents. So it's been an absolute game changer. And our home, even though our kids have big emotions sometimes because they're human, our home is such a nice place to be. And I cannot remember the last time my head hit the pillow at the end of the night and I felt really guilty and awful about how I yelled and snapped and things like that. So I want this stuff for you guys. I want you to like learn along with me in the journey. And yeah, I just want to share as much as possible because I know like once you know this stuff, it's free. You don't have to pay for it. Like it's all the content is out there. Yes, I do have things like courses and coaching and programs, but man, like this is a really great place to start. So yeah, I'm glad you're here. Okay, just before we begin, I want to acknowledge the Darug Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I live, work, and record this podcast. I pay my respects to all First Nations people, their elders, and their ancestors, and I acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, and I stand in solidarity towards a shared future. Okay, guys, get ready. Let's jump straight in. Enjoy. Okay, let's dive straight into anxiety and emotional intelligence. All right, so some of you may already know if you've heard some of my podcasts or watched some of my YouTube videos, I now can talk pretty freely and openly about my history with anxiety, which maybe I'll just recap really quickly in a moment. But a big reason why I wanted to talk about anxiety and emotional intelligence is honestly, the two fit so well together. They are so aligned in terms of when we just as people have the knowledge and the tools to dial up our emotional intelligence, that actually, it's almost like a seesaw action. Like emotional intelligence and the development of that within me and my kids has seen anxiety drop. And I particularly have been able to overcome my anxiety. And when I say overcome, it's not something that we like talk about curing, because if you think about it, anxiety is just one of the many natural, normal emotions that we all have as humans. So we don't want to get rid of it, right? It's actually there to be very protective. It's very helpful. It's like beneficial that we have this emotion and these sensations that go with it in our body. They're actually really helpful. So we don't want to get rid of it. Maybe that's my first takeaway, like off the get-go, is it's not something that we want to cure and get rid of. And that's honestly something that I tell the kids and the teens that I work with. in this space, part of my work, as well as emotional intelligence, is as an anxiety therapist for kids and teens. So I often tell them we actually don't want to totally like cure it and get it down to a 0 out of 10 and remove it completely, because that's actually very unhelpful. And it's it's not going to benefit us in certain situations where we need to have that sense of, I don't know if I'm okay, I don't know if this is safe, I need to check, or I need to do some like background, some recon. What do they call it? Recon. So yeah, it is a very normal, natural emotion. But obviously there are times, I was one of these people where it was above and beyond what it needed to be, and it was impacting my daily life. And that's obviously at the point where we tell people, kids and adults, this is where we need to get help, when it starts to impact daily life. So genuinely, my growth in emotional intelligence is the biggest thing, the biggest key that actually helped me to overcome these like huge mountainous moments of anxiety, which caused me to faint. So that was my body's response. And maybe this is a good time to kind of give you guys a little bit of a background before we dive into talking about emotional intelligence and anxiety and how they they work together really well. So as a kid and as a teenager and into my mostly all throughout my 20s, I experienced anxiety in certain situations. I was never diagnosed, but oh my goodness, like now looking back, I absolutely would have been diagnosed. If I went to, a GP or a psychologist, I would have been diagnosed with probably social anxiety. And it really showed up in obviously social situations, but situations where I felt like I was under pressure and people were looking at me or asking me to like put my opinion forward, or that I should have been in a position of authority sort of thing. So that was my therapist career before I did this work. I was a pediatric speech pathologist for 10 years. And so even in that career, I still experienced it, and I still had moments where I either fainted or I was close to fainting because I was so nervous, so anxious, and really had zero emotional intelligence. So I'm kind of proud that now I can talk about it in depth and I understand so much more of it, and I can share my story with people, and I think that really helps. But at the time I had no idea what was going on. We used to think it was just I hadn't eaten that day, or it was really hot that day, or I needed to sit down kind of thing, and I'd been standing up like when I was a kid going to church. Really, we only went at Christmas time. Let's be real. That was us. That was how we did it, and that was when I would faint. But then it went into school. If I had to go up in front of the assembly and do a talk or receive an award, something like that, then I would faint. And like I said, in my previous career, it would have been. I actually remember a time. Oh my gosh. I remember a time that I was actually a new grad, so just out of university, going for a job at a local private practice, and they were looking for a speechie, and I was a speechie, and I was like, okay, I can do this. Went along to simply have a conversation and look at the rooms and stuff within this private practice, and just felt so nervous, so out of my depth, so overwhelmed with like fear of, oh my God, I know nothing. I actually know nothing. What did I even learn for 4 years? Like, I can't do this. And within, I want to say like 10 minutes, I fainted. Luckily, I was sitting on one of the GPs. You know how they have beds in the doctors in case you need to lie down for a procedure or something? I was sitting on or perching on one of those as we chatted, and then I just like slumped down. And then obviously came to and had the conversation about being a fainter. Anyway, so it even happened, we're talking, I want to say like 15, 20 years off and on, that this fainting was a problem. And I thought, well, that's just me. I'm a fainter. Had no understanding about what it was and what was causing it. And yeah, I do remember getting some tests and things in my early 20s. After it had happened, actually at a hospital when I was doing a prac, a speech pathology prac, like a a 4-week placement or an 8-week placement, can't remember what it was. And I was so nervous because we were on the stroke ward and I had no induction because that was just how the coordinator was like running it. She was like, let's just hit the wards and we'll go see some patients and help them with their swallowing and speech. And I was like, okay. She was like, put your bag in there, let's go. So no induction, obviously felt completely out of my depth again. Huge amounts of fear and anxiety. This is the thing for me, I did not and could not speak up. I wasn't able to at that point, even at that point, right, in my 20s, speak up and say, I'm nervous, or I need a minute, or I'm not ready, or can we just sit here and have a chat first, or I'm not okay. That was not me at all. I was a nod, smile, everything is okay, don't let anyone think anything otherwise, and let's just go. So that might not be, if you're listening to this, you might be like, that's not how my child, experiences anxiety, or that's not how I do. Yes, we are all different. So this is my story, and even if it's different to yours or your child's, I think it actually just shows what huge variation we all have, and yet it's underpinned by the same thing. So anyway, I did actually faint on that day. We took a few steps down the corridor, and then I knew it. I was like, here we go, because I got to know my signs really well, but I didn't didn't know what to do about them. I just ignored them and shoved them down and thought, it's fine, everything is fine, I'm fine, until I obviously wasn't. So I woke up in one of those little family areas, like the little room with a couch and the TV, and about 6 people looking down over me with a crash cart. And they said, we had to get the crash cart because your pulse was so low we couldn't even find it. And I was like, no, I'm just a fainter. Like, absolutely mortifying. And yeah, from that point I got lots of tests and things like that. And they said, well, you're very fit and very healthy. We're not sure why you're fainting. So yeah, it only really kind of occurred to me much later when I started to look into and learn about emotional intelligence. And then obviously, long story short, heard about the particular program that I now do. I got trained and accredited in, which obviously helps kids and teens with anxiety. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell. But I want to kind of share a little bit about what really anxiety is in terms of like an anxiety disorder, and how emotional intelligence and being an emotionally intelligent parent and teaching your kids bits and pieces, modeling, emotional intelligence can be so empowering for them, and really like start that uphill battle of helping them to overcome their anxiety. So when I talk about anxiety, I'm kind of just generally talking about the emotion, but particularly, the heightened, like the really extreme anxiety, which would be diagnosed if an individual went off to a GP or a psychologist kind of thing. There are 5 different types. There are probably more, but sort of the 5 main ones are generalized anxiety disorder, so a general worrier, we'll call them a worrywart. Social anxiety, which is the one I had, so anxious and fearful and worried in social situations, maybe nervous, not very confident, things like that. Separation anxiety, probably don't need to explain what that one is. So many parents with young kids particularly experience that, and it can be something that just resolves on its own. And for my daughter, it continued a little bit into her first year of formal schooling, and I was using all my strategies, like every single one, pulling them out, and oh my goodness, it was hard. Like, I just remember thinking, it's so hard when you're on the other side of the fence kind of thing, and I'm the parent and I'm the therapist. Anyway, so the 4th one would be specific phobia. So I have worked with so many kids who have just a specific fear of dogs or birds or other animals or lifts or elevators or storms or rain, certain places in the world, like countries, which is sounds strange, but it is, black holes, bugs, insects, spiders, like you name it, feet, you name it, there can be specific phobias. Okay, so that's the 4th. And then the 5th one is OCD. So obsessive compulsive disorder. A lot of people don't realize that OCD comes under the umbrella of anxiety, but it does, and it is driven by this fear or the anxiety of, but if I don't do this thing, then something bad is going to happen and I won't be okay, or I won't be able to cope. So I have to wash my hands, check the doors are locked, and so on. There's sort of some common ones. So that's kind of like that's the rundown. I just find this stuff fascinating. It's so common now, I think, especially post-COVID. But yeah, I want to give you guys some kind of, maybe some tools and some insider kind of knowledge from a therapist that might make you go, oh my God, that makes sense, or that speaks to my situation, and I think that could be helpful. So, by the way, you might be able to tell, I have not planned 1 ounce of this episode. I thought, you know what, I've wanted to talk about anxiety and emotional intelligence for a while. I'm just going to speak off the cuff. I'm going to jump on, and like I'll edit it later. But yeah, plus you'll probably hear my kids in the background, and we have a friend over. One of their friends are over for a play date, so I apologize in advance if there's like little voices in the background. They were on the trampoline before, and I was like, nah, I'm just gonna wait a few minutes. They finished jumping and went inside, and I was like, okay, and record. Okay, so maybe let's talk about what are the kind of underpinnings. What are the thought processes, or I call them the cognitive errors, the cognitive thinking biases of the anxious brain? Because when I explain this in masterclasses and courses and stuff like that, maybe I will actually put in the show notes. I have an online course about supporting supporting anxious and sensitive kids. I think I have a masterclass on it. I think an online course. I run masterclasses like once every month or so. And this is a common one, supporting anxious kids. So there is lots out there. And yes, I'll probably put that stuff in the show notes when I jump off. But if we talk a little bit about the thinking habits that underpin anxiety, essentially, this means the anxious brain, and like I used to count myself in this. I'm out of the habit now, but with all the people I work with, I'm like, hey, this was me. Like, I get it. I get how you're thinking. And they're like, oh my God, you're so right. So 2 ways in which the anxious brain thinks, and we can call them thinking errors like I did, because they're not the typical and the like helpful or healthy or productive ways to think. Okay. So, and these underpin the anxious behaviors, which tend to be avoidance, and I'll talk about those in a sec as well. So the first error in thinking, and like the thinking habit, is that the anxious brain will overestimate the danger or the threat in a situation. So where we might see, or let's say a neurotypical person, a person without this anxious tendency, we might see a situation like, we're about to cross the road and we're just waiting for the cars to pass. We might see that situation as like neutral or safe or normal. The anxious brain will see it potentially as a threat or a dangerous situation, and they'll think that car is going to like come by, mount the curb, and then it's going to hit me, sort of thing. So they overestimate the threat, right? They see more threat, they see more danger, more negative. Those kids are going to laugh at me. That bird is going to attack me. The dog will bite me and I won't be able to stop it. All of those kind of thought processes. So we have to really understand, if you've got a child with anxiety, please know that your child is not choosing to think this way. And even though it looks like they're choosing the hard path, I promise you they're not choosing intentionally. Like, no one wants to be in this headspace of the world is scary, it is dangerous, my stomach feels awful, I don't want to go, I'm going to miss out on that party, or like there's a flaw in our logic if we're thinking that, oh my goodness, like, why do you have to be like this, and just snap out of it, sort of thing. So that's the first cognitive error, I want to say, the thinking habit. So they overestimate the threat or danger in a situation. The second part is that they will underestimate their ability to cope. So they will think, oh my goodness, that car is going to like mount the curb and come and hit me, and then I will die. I will not be able to cope. It will be the worst thing in the world, or I'll get like severely injured, or like I said, I will die. So another example is this test is going to be so hard at school, I'm going to fail and I will never be able to recover. Like, my parents will be so mad and they will yell at me. I'll get 0, like overestimating how hard or difficult this thing will be and underestimating their ability to cope or get through that situation. So I remember having a beautiful kid who had a fear, amongst other things, he had a fear of lifts, elevators, right? We call them lifts here. I think in the US, elevator is more like commonplace. Anyway, so this is the other thing, interestingly. It doesn't always have to eventuate or come out of a scary situation. That can be one cause, like let's say a dog once bit a child, so now they have a fear of dogs. That can happen. Sometimes also there's a moderate genetic component, and interestingly that means like one or both parents are anxious and have anxious tendencies, and then the child can also have that. But it can also just be that this child has maybe even observed modeled anxious behaviors. So I did have this lovely kid who had a fear of lifts and elevators because one time, like the way that he described it is that he got stuck in a lift and they were locked in a lift kind of thing, and then his mum literally like looked at me and she was like, "Oh my God," because she was like, "No, you didn't. We haven't." Like, and I was like, "That's okay. Like, we honor it anyway. We'll work on it." And then she goes, "Oh my God, that was the time that we went in a certain shopping center. We pressed the lift, not realizing that they weren't able to go down because it was like in the docks of the shopping center where all the trucks go. So they got in, the doors closed, and they pressed to go down, not realizing that they can't. That was only for like people who had the swipe cards or something. And so the doors closed, and then they just didn't go anywhere for like, I don't know, 30 seconds, maybe, not even that. And she said, "Oh, that time that we were in the shop," and she explained it. And then what they did is eventually the doors, I think they clicked the up arrow or they opened the doors, and anyway, they walked out. And she said, "I didn't even realize that, my child was freaked out or stressed out or anything. But as the child remembers it, they got locked in the lift." Anyway, so with that example, the thinking errors would be the lift is gonna, if I get in a lift, it's gonna lock me in, or it's gonna close, or it's gonna break, and I won't be able to get out, and I will die, or like it can be as I want to say like grandiose or exaggerated as that. And I say to the kids, I'm like, "Guys, it doesn't have to make sense, and we will work on it. Like, we can overcome it, right?" I have a lot of kids who they don't like to go in certain like separate rooms in their house. If all their family is down one end, they don't want to go up the front to their bedroom to get something, or go in the bathroom down the end of the hallway because they're worried that someone is going to be there, something will jump scare and jump out at them, or someone's going to break through the window like a baddie or a burglar. And like that's never happened in the past. It's so unlikely, yada yada, but it doesn't matter. They still have that fear and that worry. Anyway, so those are some of the kind of main thinking habits. And the reason, so I'm going to park that for a second because that's enough for like this is not a masterclass, but some of the really interesting ways in which emotional intelligence can help kids with their anxieties, unless obviously if they have a therapist, wonderful, like that is amazing, and that's probably the best practice, is to go and get some get early intervention where you can. But emotional intelligence, if we think about it, it's really understanding your emotions and what they are doing maybe for you or sometimes against you. And so when we have too much anxiety and we have these thinking habits that are kind of tricking us into thinking we're in danger, basically, they help us. They make us want to avoid certain situations. So avoid going out if it's raining or there's going to be a storm. Avoid going to the park because there might be a dog. Avoid going to the lifts and we have to take the stairs, kind of thing. So I always explain to kids really respectfully that, hey, this thinking this way and feeling these things is actually not helping you. It's kind of it's like impacting your day. You're missing out on things that maybe you have to do. You're avoiding things you have to do, like maybe going to school, but also it's making you miss out on things that actually could be really fun and you might want to do, like going to a party where there's going to be, it's a farm animal party, or it's at the top of a really tall building, or, it's a pool party kind of thing. So I help kids to sort of see that, and like I said, in a really respectful way. It's not like, making them feel really bad or shaming them about it. It's saying, hey, let's work on this because it is impacting your day-to-day life, and no one likes to feel, scared and stressed and worried and anxious all the time. So with emotional intelligence, a few things. I think the beauty of it is that we are actually opening up that conversation about emotions. We are normalizing them because they are normal and they're very natural. And I think helping our kids to understand that, these emotions are doing things for us. Unfortunately, sometimes those kind of thinking habits, the ways that we think, are actually making us feel scared and worried when we could have different thoughts, more realistic thoughts about certain situations. And when we think more realistically instead of more negatively, we don't feel as worried and scared. We feel like, okay, well, I don't know if I'll like it, but it's probably not going to kill me. Or like, you know what, maybe I could just give it a go. I could just take one small step into that situation. So the kind of approach I take is underpinned by CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. But also I love to insert and maybe infuse some somatic techniques. So the one I know and the one I'm trained in is EFT tapping, which is emotional freedom techniques. And so we know that if we're talking to our kids about emotions, if we are normalizing them, putting the spotlight on them, really talking about them, unpacking them, and helping our kids learn that if we think a certain way, it's like in a negative, scary, unrealistic way, we're going to feel scared, worried, avoid, and things like that. But if we think in a more realistic way about the facts of the situation and what usually happens in this situation and what happens to other people in this situation and what happened last time I was in this situation, and like, did my worried thought really come true or not? Oh my goodness, when we start unpacking that stuff with the child, their emotional landscape kind of shifts. It's really, really cool to see. And they start to think differently about dogs or about storms or about tests or about speeches and speaking in front of people or, performing. They start thinking differently and they start feeling differently. And when you feel differently, you don't go into, you feel a little bit more calm, a little bit more in control, a little bit more capable, and you don't have that elevated sense of fight or flight, which is, when we're erupting or we're, melting down, or we're saying, no, I can't, I'm never going to school, it's going to be too scary, no way, you can't even get me there, I'm staying in bed, we see a huge reduction in that. And as I was mentioning before, when we bring something like a somatic technique in, like EFT tapping, then we're actually getting straight to the nervous system and to the amygdala, that little fight, flight, smoke alarm part of our brain that does tell us we are in danger, alert, put all systems, mobilize everything. All right. So I love that, maybe that's one of my suggestions if you have a sensitive or an anxious child and sometimes they're avoidant, sometimes they're not confident, please look into EFT tapping. Please look into getting them some support with an anxiety therapist or psychologist or someone like me. I do it as well. And I have an EFT course on my website. And that's something that I do, I do sessions as well. You can get any practitioner who's accredited in EFT to do sessions with you or your child or both. So I think that combination is really, really powerful. Okay. The last thing I will say is we know that the thoughts that we have underpin and drive the feelings that we experience, as I was kind of mentioning this before, and those feelings that we have then drive our behavior. I'm going to give it a go, or I am absolutely never going to try that. You can't get me near it, sort of thing. So a great example, this is something to think about and maybe to even explain to your kids, is that in one situation, there can be one event or situation going on, but there can be two different ways that we behave, or two different ways that we show up in that situation, two different ways we handle it. So one situation could be, the example is, let's say mum is home late and we're waiting at home for her. The first, if we think about the thoughts that we could have, which will underpin how we feel and then drive how we behave. The first thought could be, let's make a really negative, unrealistic thought. Mum is home late. What if she's been in an accident? That's the first one. So that's what the anxious brain will tend to go towards, right? Something like that. Mum's home late. Oh, she's been in an accident. That's what I think. So guess what I'm going to feel? Nervous, scared, worried, anxious, right? And then how am I going to behave, or what am I going to do? I'm going to call her, I'm going to text her 20 times, I'm going to pace up and down the hallway, I'm going to like open the door and wait out on the street, or I'm going to like call, bug my dad and say, Dad, where's Mom? I'm so, I'll be crying, I'll be upset, like melting down. You can basically, picture that. So one situation, that's one way that it could happen. That's one path. Let's take another path, which is how this CBT and this work helps kids to like get into this path. Is Mum is home late. I wonder if she's caught in traffic or getting takeaway. That's a different thought, right? It's the thought that changes how we feel and then how we behave and what our actions are. So instead of, oh my God, she's been in an accident, it's, oh, maybe she's stuck in traffic or she's getting takeaway. How would I feel if I have those thoughts? And I ask the kids when I do this activity, and they're like, calm, happy, bored, excited for takeaway. So I'm like, whoa, if you felt happy, calm, bored, excited, like, would you be pacing? Would you be calling Mum? Would you be melting down? They're like, no, I'd probably just keep watching TV. I'm like, brilliant. So it's so helpful to help kids just like open their awareness to look at how I think about a situation, about my friends, or about the speech, or about the assignment, or about the dog. How I think underpins and creates how I feel in my body. And then how I feel is going to drive my behavior as to whether I'm okay, I just keep going with my activity, or I give that thing a shot, or on the other hand, if I, avoid like the plague, say I'm never going to do it, quit and, miss out. So I'm going to leave it there because I'm pretty sure this is like half an hour now and I meant to do like a 20-minute episode. I love talking about this stuff. I would love to know if you want to hear more, because I could go way deeper into some of the thoughts, some of the strategies that we use in the CBT program. I obviously encourage, if you have a child who you think is anxious, or if they actually have an anxiety diagnosis, anxiety disorder, please get some support from a health professional. There is so much, like, on the one hand, that is best practice, of course, get your child some support, but also on the other hand, there is so much you can do, so much as a parent that you can learn to support and make accommodations and help build resilience in your child. So it's like a bit of both. I don't want to put like the onus on parents and go, you can do this, like, come on, learn all these things, become a therapist. Like, no. But they're, in saying that, you can build your capacity to really know how to support them, which is awesome. So I hope you enjoyed that brain dump on anxiety and emotional intelligence. As you guys know, I love all things emotional intelligence. And so if you haven't just trawled my website, please go and do that, because I have some resources. I'm actually, depending on when this episode airs, I'm in the middle of moving everything on my website to a whole new platform and all my courses, and it's taking a long time. So I don't know if it's going to be like, if you click on it now, stephaniepinto.com, who knows if you're going to get the old website or the flashy new one. But there are resources on there, and I've got a bunch of them. Some of them are free. Some of them are like $5, $10 Australian, right? So, very, very cheap. And they're all around emotional intelligence, managing challenging behavior, understanding emotions, anxiety, and so on. And if you don't already have a copy of my book, I would love you to go out and grab one of those, because it does help, just filling your brain, filling your mind, kind of watering that garden with as much emotional intelligence and parenting information as you can. You start to get a really good picture of what the experts agree works and what we know from child development research and psychology and everything. And it will really pull you away from that old, I want to say, behaviorism, the carrots and the sticks, the reward charts, like all of those really outdated tactics. I'm going to leave it there. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know your feedback, and please make sure you have a look at some of the other episodes, because I've been doing some with my husband recently. He's a big gamer, and so we have an episode about computer games, screen time, social media, and things like that. And also just his journey into emotional intelligence from being a pretty, I want to say, like, authoritarian, punishment-based type of, parent. So he's made a big 180, and it's really cool to kind of get his brain on how he did that and how it was for him and things like that. So please sift through some of the other episodes on the podcast. I might ask you a sneaky favor. If you can just take a minute after you listen to this and give it a rating or a review or a 5-star kind of thing on, if you listen to it on, I think it's Apple, Spotify, Audible, those kind of places, that would mean the world, because it really does help those places and those platforms see that this is a worthwhile podcast to listen to, and it will push it out to other people, other parents who may want to listen. So that would be awesome. All right, thank you guys. I hope you have a great rest of the day. As usual, I will see you probably same time next week for another episode. I'm actually publishing more than one a week at the moment. There are times when I'm doing 2 and 3 per week. Now that I have guests, I have solo episodes, and I have my husband, so pretty cool, pretty exciting. All right, thank you guys. Take care.